Okay, I'm going to share my screen so that I can introduce myself with a photograph rather than the back wall of my office. And you'll see I've now got lockdown hair compared to this one. But welcome everyone. Thanks for joining this session about an upcoming publication. It's the first one I've ever done, so it's also the first time I've ever presented in this way. I've normally done things which are much more collaborative and less commercial, so do help me with that if you need some to give me some feedback about my presentation of this. I do want to make it as open as possible and as much of a discussion as possible. I'm proposing that this session is a look over the problems that we've got at the moment, how Secure Science for GCSE will help fix those. But there's a lot of things going on at the moment. I'm really interested to hear from colleagues who are working in schools and otherwise, if the discussion is going off in a different direction to the way you expected. Now, I'm just going to come off share for a second because for some reason I now can't move things forward, just to let you know. Okay, so there we go, I can move. So we've created this resource, Secure Science GCSE, because there are several challenges that we hope to help with. We know that there are gaps in students' knowledge at the moment. We're aiming this towards the end of secondary school, and those students have had a very disrupted time and they have lots of those gaps. And it's not just gaps in individual topics, it's understanding of the whole concept, that had they been with a teacher in a classroom, they would have been able to have picked up that whole concept, and that's a bit of a gap for them at the moment. They do seem to have difficulties making connections between the topics, which is partly because of COVID lockdown, and also because the way we teach science means that we teach topic by topic, and we quite often have different teachers teaching different topics. So making the connections between them is quite tricky to do in schools with our timetabling challenges, and those underlying principles can often not carry through. The students which I am involved with, I was going to say teach then, I don't actually teach them anymore, which is a bit of a shame, but they have gaps in their vocabulary. If you come from a disadvantaged background, the majority of the students I am involved in their science education, they do have gaps. They don't have the technical vocabulary that helps them to make sense of science and then to communicate it. That then lends itself to a lack of confidence for those students because they can't communicate it. Often they know non-verbally, they know stuff, but they struggle to retrieve it and make sense of it and bring it all together. All of that is exacerbated by the pressures due to the pandemic. And we know that the people who are in front of those young people at the moment are not generally specialists. And in science, we can't be a specialist in everything anyway. You know, our degrees are very specialist, even within the same subject. You will have some gaps. So we intend to try and make life easier for all teachers and all educators who are involved with children and getting everyone back on track. Our solution is 3 bits. The majority of what I'll talk about today is the student workbook and the teacher resource. There is a digital platform which will do a lot of this as well, and the two work really well together, but it's not launched yet, so it's all a bit top secret, and we'll be able to talk about that much more in the coming weeks and months. But at the moment we're just looking at the student workbook and the teacher resource, which can be used in class time in school. It can also be used for homework, etc. There's lots of different uses for it that I'll cover later. All of the thinking that's gone into Secure Science is centred around a particular process which I've seen for the last 20 years when expert teachers are moving students forward, and particularly at that end point when you've got a group of year 11s who have gaps. When I took over, it was my second head of department role, I arrived in a school in January and our pass rate was sitting on 24%. It was also at the change of the rules around modules, and they'd taken all of their resits and couldn't take them. That was a whole other set of admin nightmares. But the core of the problem was that the students had enormous gaps, and the little bits that they did know weren't coming together to enable them to be able to perform in those exams. We did catch them up really quickly. I'm reflecting on it later of how we did that. So this is 10 years ago. I thought we were, I thought that was what happened in all schools, and it does happen in a lot of schools. But what happens is where you've got an expert teacher, they are doing this unconsciously, where they can cover a lot of ground with young people. They bring in ideas from right down. So this example on the screen is about biological structures and functions. It's a really powerful idea in biology, but to understand that, you need to get plant and animal cells. You need to get specialized cells. You need to get what respiration is. And all of those, an expert teacher can pull together. So what we're trying to do is replicate what expert teachers do. And what we think they do is enable kids to think about where they are. What do they know about this topic? And that could be stuff they know that they can remember. And that struggle when they're retrieving it is really useful part of the process. There is going to be gaps, and how you give them that information and allow them to connect it all together is the real kind of crux of what we're doing with this process. Because we want them to say, okay, this is the topic, I know a little bit, where else do I get that information? And some of this was born out of the frustration that I had, that I couldn't find a resource that helped me to do this when I was helping my own children through lockdown. So it was like, where do you get all of that information from? The textbooks weren't helping me. I've got quite a collection, as I'm sure you can imagine, from being a science teacher for so long, but they were all topic by topic. None of them were the big concept and the big idea. So what we do here is we give all of that information in one place in a big fat knowledge organizer that's really rich in very pertinent information to these powerful ideas. Then we take some cards, so it's the same information chopped up into cards, so that students say, right, here's my topic, this is what I already know about it, and I've scribbled that down and struggled to retrieve it, so that's quite helpful. I've still got some gaps. I'm going to have a look at the knowledge organizer. I'm going to deal out the cards that I think might be something to do with this. And the digital platform, you can see 2 little screenshots there, has got some videos narrated by me, which is a bit embarrassing, but there is a set of videos that go through all of that concept. So you can pick up some more information there. You can also test yourself and diagnose where you are using the digital platform. So there's lots of sources of information to kind of fill in those gaps. And then we know that students will quite happily write all sorts of science, the bits that they can remember that aren't pertinent to the question. So there's another stage before they start writing where they chuck out the stuff that is not asked about, because it's a really good way to lose marks, to talk brilliant science, but it's the wrong part for that question. So then they start to solve it, and we've written out a structure which you can see on the far right, which helps them think through how to construct their answer. So it's centered around the key vocabulary, what's the key terms that they need, how are they then going to make those into sentences? How are they going to present that? Is a table going to work for this? Would bullet points work? Would drawing a diagram work? And it helps them step through that. And you'll know that there is only a certain set of questions within the exams, and we've covered all of those kind of styles and structures that they need to be able to recreate. So they go through that process, and it helps them to pull together an understanding and then practice. Now at the end, we'll just go back a slide, because that structure needs more practice then. You need to do that spaced over time, so that you've answered one question about the structure function relationship relating to root hair cells in this one. What about the relationship between muscle cells and their structure and their function? So in the back of the book, I think it's in the back, there is a set of practice questions that over time students can come back to and practice those skills. And we give all of the guidance of how to structure it, how to schedule it within the teacher guidance, so that everything kind of pulls together as a really coherent system. But that system, because it's so refined into just the key ideas, the key powerful ideas, you can go really quickly. We know that we've got a lot of specialist, non-specialist teachers who would struggle to pick up, say you've got a physicist would struggle to pick up a biology session and teach it with that level of depth. I'm not a physicist by any stretch of the imagination. I would struggle to pick up a physics section. So the teacher guidance helps teachers to have the knowledge that they need just for that session, so that it's really successful and everyone feels really confident when they come out of it. So these are the problems kind of broken down a little bit. Our first problem is around diagnosing and addressing the gaps in knowledge. This is the real kind of centre of what we're about here. We know there are gaps. Learning at home, despite all of the hard work that we've put in, things happened. You know, kids have had a very disrupted time and there are gaps. And it could be that it's a whole concept, it could be that it's an idea or a set of vocabulary that they're missing, and all the students will be different. So all of the resources help to fill in those gaps in a really friendly way. So dealing out a set of cards is a much friendlier way of going, oh, I've got a gap in my knowledge and now I need to look it up in a textbook, which I don't know where to start, because students these days can't use an index generally. And they've got everything, all the information that they need, so that they can then construct their answer. Teachers need to know about the common misconceptions, and students need to learn that concept free of misconceptions. The concepts are all laid out and the questions are laid out to tackle misconceptions and address them. And the teacher guidance has lots of key ideas about how to fix when you've got a misconception coming up and what's likely to happen in that session. So if you're not a specialist teacher, you can then pull in all of that idea and say, right, in this session, they might not know the difference between evaporation and boiling, for example, but they can pull this together and this is the resource that I'm going to use. And it's all kind of built in so that teachers don't have to plan this from scratch. The digital platform gives you immediate and specific feedback, and the marking is really easy, so that you can mark this really easily without it being a massive teacher workload. It's all really nicely set out, and the digital platform will do a lot for you. The questions check and embed the understanding and move you forward. It's very clever, but very top secret. Connecting topics together is a real kind of difference of this product. We don't have it topic by topic. We don't have it spec point by spec point written into as a textbook is. Even the revision guides that you can buy, the revision guides have that kind of, this is the topic, this is paper one, these are the topics that you need. We've taken a very different approach here and put together the topics all in one place, regardless of spec. It is mapped to the spec. Within the teacher guidance, you can see where we cover everything. There are some areas where we haven't covered purposefully because it's an overwhelming amount of information. You've only got 30 sessions. You're not going to cover everything. And that's a very deliberate decision, which I'm happy to discuss that bit. So the topics are then organised into the videos and into the knowledge organisers. The vocabulary is built into everything. We expect students to be able to see lots of vocabulary in context with definitions so that they get more fluent at using it. All of the keywords that we use, and we've identified some of the tier 2 words which students need to be able to make sense of the questions generally, and the tier 3 very kind of technical science words, and work them all into a glossary. And there are command word explainers which go through that kind of, it's tier 2 vocabulary really, but if you don't know the difference between explain and describe, then you're unlikely to produce an answer which is going to get all the marks. So we wanted to make sure there's a very kind of clear kid speak version of, if it says explain, this is what you need to do. If it says plot, this is what you need to do. And we've unpicked those and put them into student speak. We hope to build confidence, and we do that in a very friendly manner. So you'll see the language that we use in the structured writing frames is, you know, we put in scribble this down because that feels a little less intimidating than list all of the ideas that you've got. It gives you the permission to get it wrong and to try things out. And there are several kind of layers of building up the answer. So it's all that each one is very low stakes. It's not you're right or wrong. It's a let's see what's there and let's build on it. And we have purposefully taken a very informal tone, which was quite interesting working with the author team, because none of us are used to writing like this. So it's quite tricky. I should say, actually, I missed a bit on my slide earlier about how we do that. The last project that I did was creating the Science Mastery programme at ARC, and that was a very teacher-facing one, so it's very different in this respect. And then there are, within the EdTech, there is opportunities to rate your confidence so that teachers can respond to that, and it also helps the AI to build a picture of where students are. We hope to boost recovery and resilience. We've only put them into 30 sessions. It's quite hard condensing all of science GCSE into 30 sessions. That's a lot of where the kind of value of this is. That carefully is a very kind of key term here. We've unpicked all of the science curriculum, turned it upside down and inside out, and restructured it so that there is a really nice route through where the difficulty and the amount of kind of cognitive load for each session is very carefully designed. It can be used straight away. It can be used really flexibly. You could use this way back in year 9 to check those kind of key ideas. You could use it right up to year 11. And if you've got BTEC students going into sixth form, where you want to make sure they've got a conceptual understanding before they hit A level, or even if they're students who have had gaps, everyone's had gaps, going into their A level course, this is a really good summary of all of the science that they will need, particularly for students going into vocational courses. So you could use this alongside your main teaching. You could use it as homework, which is completely self-directed, particularly when the platform launches. You could use it after mocks when you've diagnosed where those gaps are, or you could use it in revision time because you've got those chunks. If you've got less experienced colleagues in your team, or you are a less experienced colleague, having this kind of resource develops those revision sessions. There's a learning curve when you're teaching students away from the spec, which has been mapped throughout 2 years. And this enables non-specialist and new teachers to have that time to reflect and to build their expertise in this area to help kids catch up. It's quite a skill. And then we want to support teachers and tutors, because this learning won't happen. The revision guide is available direct to students, but that experience is driven by teachers, and we want teachers to feel successful. So we give them a crib sheet. They've got a playbook of how to get across all of these key ideas. They've got proven techniques in there. This is written by and inspired by successful teachers, of me watching them in the classroom saying, oh, you do that as well, and you do that as well. And they're all doing the same thing of diagnosing where we started, what's that starting point, where are the gaps, and what's the best way to explain it to catch up quickly. All of the resources are really nicely laid out, so you can pick it up and teach with it with very little planning time. Obviously, we encourage you to plan lessons, but if you've got supply in for a day because someone's been taken ill, then you've got something which doesn't need very much planning. Because it's all thought through for you, and because we've designed it to non-specialists, tutors, and people who haven't got lots and lots of planning time. And you're not planning a year's worth of curriculum as head of department here. This is to help teachers make sure that there is that access to the curriculum for everyone. So just to sum up, we have a print and digital recovery thing. A lot of the stuff which I can speak to at the moment is about print, so if you do have any questions about it, do ask. The digital we'll be able to talk about in more depth very soon. It's really exciting what's going on there, but it's very, very protected at the moment because we're just putting those final finishing touches into that platform. It's created by me. I've been a science teacher for 20 years this year, come September, and I've seen so many students come through and seen what works. As I said, I worked for ARC in the last couple of years designing Science Mastery. I've also worked for Ofqual and the BBC, and done quite a lot of roles looking at and reflecting on how do we move kids forward fast. So this is 15 years in the making. We might have created it very, very quickly, but this is 15 years of thinking that's gone into it. The video explainers and adaptive questions for each session really help to strengthen those memory skills. We're using a lot of cognitive science in the background. Again, if you've got any questions about what we've, the evidence that we've built that on, I'd be delighted to talk about those. We want to rebuild confidence. My daughter's in year 10, and I think that year group is about to be the most anxious set of teenagers we've ever seen. She's anxious already. A lot are going through exams at the moment. And there is a lot of pressure on those students where we've had a different way of awarding grades. That next set of grades is really important to a lot of schools because we have to maintain a trajectory. And they are aware of those gaps. They are aware of the importance of GCSE. And however the exams are done next year, we want to alleviate as much of that pressure as we can. We guide the students with knowledge organisers. It's a completely different way of thinking about the curriculum and sectioning it into bits that can be bite-sized pieces, and they're in the workbook with a real kind of thinking about how students construct really good exam answers. There's lots of practice. They can keep coming back to it and practice later, and the solutions are worded so that they can really learn from it as they go through. So they can be completely independent, they can be guided by teachers. It embeds really strong science foundations. That's partly for next steps in education, but the first thing which I'd said to Katie at the very beginning of this was I am worried that there is a lot of students who are having a science education but are coming through now and don't really understand how a vaccine works. And if you are scared of something, then if you don't understand something, you're going to be scared of it, or you could be scared of it. And there aren't enough people who are taking the vaccines. There's a lot of kind of misrepresented science around at the moment. And that's my real concern, is that students really leave school with a good rounded understanding of the basics. And the answers are at the back, which is really helpful. Okay, so this is our where you can find more information. You'll see me on all of this, so you're welcome to contact me directly at Brave Teaching. So that's on Twitter, I'm at Brave Teaching. But the guys at Collins have got some samples available in the very near future, so you can have a look at what this looks like in reality and how your students could get involved with this and how they could benefit from it and how your teachers could. If you sign up for the email updates and be the first to hear when those samples are available, and there is some pre-order bits of the website if you just follow that, collins.co.uk/secure science. Right, I'm going to turn this off so if you need to take a note of those bits of information, then do, because I would love to hear if this is fitting with that experience in schools with colleagues, because I've been busy writing with this and I want to see how this is kind of sitting. So our challenges that we've talked about of students have got gaps, teachers are worried about those year 10s coming through. Has anyone got any questions or comments to add to the chat? Okay. Oh, excellent. Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. So, does it cover all the exam board specs? The science is the science, and it is the same science in the spec across all of the boards as of the new curriculum in 2016. So yes, it does. We haven't mapped it to all the exam board specs yet. But we can offer advice. I can offer advice and guidance about where there are differences. We've mapped it to AQA because that's where most of the schools I know, that's where their exams are. But the science is exactly the same in all the other exam board specs. So thank you for that, Mrs. Thomas. Oh, Rebecca. That's an excellent question. I'm really glad you've asked if something like this is being developed for primary, particularly because my Collins colleagues are on the call. I would absolutely love to develop something like this for primary science. I spend quite a lot of my time as a consultant working with primary schools, and I talk about the same big ideas and how they build through primary. So I would love to. There isn't one yet. But it's definitely something that I'm interested in. Cassie, can it be mapped to the Scottish curriculum? As an NQT, I'm finding a lot of great GCSE resources that don't map into Scotland? Excellent question. I had a conversation with a colleague of mine who's moving up to Scotland for September, taking over as a head of science, and she's had a look at it. She was actually involved in a lot of me throwing the idea around early on, and she can see that this is the same science. We will need to do a little piece of work to make sure that there is a good alignment and that we're covering everything that's important in Scotland. But the science is the science, and I think in Scotland that would work well. Brilliant. Okay, you're welcome. Any final questions to pop into the chat? Okay, I'm sure I'll see some of you later on in the tomorrow in the final sessions. Thank you ever so much. Thanks to the ASE for setting up and the brilliant tech going on in the background, and thanks everyone for attending. It really means a lot that people are supporting like that. It's, as I said, this is the first time I've done anything like this, so this is a whole new experience. So thank you, and I hope to be in touch with some of you soon.